Have you ever wondered what ancient wonders still whisper beneath the earth's quiet breath? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we uncover the marvels our ancestors carved from stone, soil, and spirit. From the waters of Bath to the terraces of Banaue, each monument still hums with forgotten life. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there tonight. The Roman Baths of Bath. Steam rises in the cool morning air of Somerset, curling above the ancient stones as if the earth itself is exhaling. The Roman Baths of Bath, one of the most remarkable and enduring legacies of Roman Britain, still stand as a living memory of an empire's vision, precision, and devotion to both luxury and belief. Here, beneath the streets of a modern English city, the waters still flow, warm, mineral-rich, and endlessly patient as they have for nearly 2,000 years. It is not merely a ruin, it is a rhythm, a heartbeat of stone and steam that once defined the Roman idea of civilization. Long before Rome's legions reached this green island, before Latin words echoed in its valleys, the natural hot springs of Bath were already sacred. The native Celtic tribes who lived here, the Dobuni, worshipped the bubbling pools as gifts from the gods. They called upon Sulis, a local deity of healing, light, and prophecy. To them, these waters were a passageway between the mortal and the divine, a place where illness could be washed away and fortune restored. Offerings were cast into the steaming pools, coins, jewelry, even small effigies, all given to the mysterious goddess who lived within the spring. When the Romans arrived in the 1st century AD, they saw not strangeness, but kinship. Their own goddess Minerva, patron of wisdom, strategy, and crafts, shared the same virtues as Sulis, and so they merged the two into one. Sulis Minerva, the goddess of healing and wisdom, uniting Roman religion with native belief. Around her sacred spring, the Romans began to build. What rose was not just a bathhouse, but an entire complex, a temple, a sanctuary, a marvel of engineering and devotion that came to be known as Aquae Sulis, the waters of Sulis. Imagine it as it once was. The air thick with warmth and incense, the sound of trickling water echoing off pale limestone walls, lamps glowing softly, their light shimmering on the surface of the baths, citizens entering through colonnaded courtyards, removing their sandals, feeling the heat of the floors beneath their feet. The Romans saw bathing not merely as cleanliness, but as ritual, an act of purification for the body and soul. Every Roman city, from Rome to Pompeii, from Gaul to Britannia, built its public baths, but few were as striking, as perfectly harmonized with nature, as those at Aquae Sulis. The engineers of the empire harnessed the natural hot spring, a gift of geology. Deep beneath the Mendip Hills, rainwater sank into the limestone, was heated by the earth's core, and then surged upward at nearly 46 degrees Celsius. The Romans built a network of lead-lined channels to guide this water precisely where they needed it. It poured into the Great Bath, a vast rectangular pool, nearly 1.6 meters deep, surrounded by grand columns and paved walkways. Beneath the shimmering surface, the pool was lined with thick sheets of lead, laid with a precision that has endured millennia. Above it once there was a roof, perhaps vaulted in timber and tile, that trapped the mist and the murmur of voices. The Great Bath was only the beginning. Beyond it, the complex expanded into a sequence of smaller chambers: the caldarium, the hot room, the tepidarium, the warm room, and the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The visitor would move from one to the next in a slow ritual, first heated, then cleansed, then chilled, a rhythm designed to relax muscles, open pores, and purify the skin. Oil and strigil, steam and stone, a perfect equilibrium of body and architecture. Yet for all its practicality, the baths were also profoundly spiritual. Just beyond the Great Bath stood the Temple of Sulis Minerva. Its great pediment bore the image of a Gorgon's head, a Romanized emblem of divine power, flanked by winged victories and swirling patterns. Inside, priests tended to the eternal flame, and worshippers brought offerings to the goddess, whose waters gave life to the city. Hundreds of votive coins and jewelry were cast into the spring, along with small tablets of lead inscribed with prayers, curses, and pleas. These depictiones, or curse tablets, remain among the most haunting relics ever found. "May the one who has stolen my cloak never rest, neither in sleep nor in life," one reads. Its letters painstakingly carved by a Roman hand. Another begs for the restoration of health. Each tablet was folded, thrown into the water, and left for the goddess to judge. The spring became not just a place of cleansing, but a place of justice. To stand by the pool even now, knowing that thousands of such voices once whispered into its steam, is to feel the pulse of time itself. The engineering that sustained this place was nothing short of genius. The Romans understood the delicate balance between water, heat, and air. The floors of the heated rooms were raised on small stone pillars, hypocausts, beneath which hot air from furnaces flowed freely, warming the stones above. Walls were lined with flues that carried steam upward, circulating warmth through the entire structure. Every inch was calculated. Every sound, from the soft trickle of runoff to the whisper of rising steam, was part of the experience. Beyond the function there was luxury. The walls were once plastered and painted in rich reds, ochres and blues. Bronze fittings gleamed. Statues of nymphs and gods watched silently from their alcoves. The scent of oil and herbs hung in the air. In this place citizens of all ranks gathered. Soldiers, merchants, politicians, slaves, women, children, all equal in the eyes of Sulis Minerva. The bath was the great equalizer of Roman life, a meeting ground of body and soul, wealth and humility. Yet it was also a reminder of power. For to build such a place in conquered Britain so far from Rome's heart was to proclaim, Rome's order, Rome's mastery, reaches even here. Every stone laid in Bath was a declaration of empire, but empire fades. In the 4th and 5th centuries, as the Roman legions withdrew and their world began to fracture, Hallway Sulis fell silent. The temples were abandoned, the baths cold, the roofs collapsed. The springs, still flowing, buried the ruins in silt and time. For more than 1,000 years, the site lay forgotten beneath the earth, its sacred waters hidden beneath medieval streets and churches. Yet the spring never stopped. It continued to bubble, to rise, to breathe. In time, stories spread of miraculous waters beneath the city, waters that healed, waters that remembered. By the 18th century, as the Georgian age dawned, Bath was reborn. Beneath elegant new facades and symmetrical streets, the ruins of Rome stirred again. Workers digging foundations uncovered strange fragments, columns, carved heads, Roman coins, and lead piping that still carried warm water. When the great bath itself was rediscovered, its stone steps leading down into still warm water, the world realized what had survived. Excavation after excavation revealed an entire Roman complex beneath modern Bath, one of the most complete in the world. And as the mud was cleared and the stones restored, the old rhythms seemed to return. The spring still flowed as it had for centuries. The same heat, the same minerals, the same timeless current. Archaeologists found the curse tablets, the coins, the bronze sculptures, even the gilded head of Minerva herself, her serene gaze corroded by time but undiminished. To look into her eyes now is to look through layers of faith and empire. Every inch of this site tells a story of endurance. The Roman baths are more than ruins. They are a living intersection between nature and civilization. The water that once soothed the weary of Rome now rises in the same pools. The channels still guide it as they did under the Caesars. The limestone still bears the imprint of human hands, smooth from centuries of touch. When you stand by the great bath at twilight, the surface of the water glows gold under the lamps. Steam drifts upward, wrapping around the columns. The air is quiet, except for the gentle sound of droplets falling. In that silence, the centuries collapse. You can almost hear the faint echo of conversation, the soft splash of a bather's step, the low chant of a priest at the temple. Time feels circular, water rising, falling, rising again, unbroken, eternal. The genius of the Romans was not just in their conquest, but in their capacity to make the natural world part of their design. They did not conquer this spring. They listened to it, honored it, and built around its rhythm. Even in decay, that understanding endures. The Roman baths of Bath remain one of the finest examples of ancient engineering, luxury, and faith in all of Europe, a monument not only to the empire that built it, but to humanity's enduring relationship with water, the element that heals, that remembers, that connects us to both earth and time. And as you leave the Bath complex today, stepping out into the city that grew around it, you realize something extraordinary. The spring still flows. The same water that touched the feet of Roman soldiers and the hands of Celtic priests still moves beneath your feet, winding through the same stone channels, whispering the same quiet stories into the air. It is more than history. It is life itself, patient, unbroken, eternal. The Mesa Verde cliff dwellings. High on the sandstone cliffs of Colorado, where the desert wind whispers through canyons and the sun bleaches the ancient stone, lie the dwellings of a people who once called the vertical world their home. The Mesa Verde cliff dwellings stand silent now, a maze of carved alcoves, stacked rooms, and weathered walls that seem to grow directly out of the canyon itself. For centuries, these homes have waited, cradled in shadow, half in ruin, half in reverence, guarding the memory of the ancestral Puebloans, the ancient inhabitants of this rugged plateau. Their story is one of ingenuity, adaptation, and quiet endurance, a civilization that thrived in harmony with a landscape that offered both protection and challenge. Yet, as the centuries passed, they vanished, leaving behind the echo of their footsteps and the architecture of their faith. The cliffs of Mesa Verde rise abruptly from the surrounding plains, the name meaning green table in Spanish, a plateau crowned with juniper and pinyon pine where the air smells of sage and the wind hums across the stone. It was here, sometime around the late 1100s, that the ancestral Puebloans began to move their homes from the mesa tops down into the sheer alcoves below. They carved their world into the cliffs themselves, building entire villages tucked beneath stone overhangs that faced the sun. To see them even today, tiny doorways and kivas clinging to impossible ledges, is to marvel at both their courage and their craftsmanship. Each village was a blend of practicality and spiritual design. The sandstone was cut into blocks, shaped by hand, and mortared with a mixture of earth, ash, and water. Over time, hundreds of rooms emerged, living spaces, storerooms, ceremonial chambers, all nestled within the protective embrace of the canyon wall. The cliffs offered more than shelter, they offered balance. In summer, the high walls shaded the dwellings from the burning sun. In winter, they captured and reflected warmth. Every placement was purposeful. Every line of stone was both home and harmony with nature. Perhaps the most famous of these is Cliff Palace, the largest and grandest of the dwellings, a sprawling complex of more than 150 rooms and 23 kivas, circular, subterranean structures used for religious and communal gatherings. Standing before it today, it feels less like a ruin and more like a revelation, a city frozen in time, its towers and plazas still watching over the canyon. Archaeologists believe that as many as 100 people may have lived here at once. Smoke once rose from the hearths, laughter echoed off the walls, and the rhythmic sound of grinding corn filled the air. The ancestral Puebloans were master builders, farmers, and astronomers. Even in this arid land, they cultivated maize, beans, and squash on the mesa tops, channeling precious rainfall through hand-dug ditches and terraced gardens. From their vantage point above the canyons, they studied the movements of the sun and moon, aligning their rituals and architecture with celestial cycles. Each kiva was not only a place of gathering, but a reflection of the universe, a round chamber symbolizing the womb of the earth with a small hole in the floor called a sipapu, believed to be the portal through which their ancestors first emerged into this world. Firelight flickered across the plastered walls, illuminating murals of spirals and geometric designs, symbols of rain, fertility, and balance. Every act, from planting crops to constructing homes, was a sacred gesture woven into the rhythm of nature. Yet life here was not without hardship. The landscape, though stunning, was demanding. The seasons brought extremes, scorching summers, freezing winters, and long dry spells that tested even the most resilient. Food and water had to be managed carefully, stored in sealed rooms deep within the dwellings. The cliffs, though defensive, could also be isolating. Paths carved into the rock connected one home to another. Narrow ledges and handholds where people climbed with baskets and water jars. The very act of living here required balance, strength, and trust in both community and environment. Still, they endured for centuries, thriving in one of North America's most extraordinary settings. Then sometime in the late 1200s, the rhythm began to falter. Signs of strain appeared: less fertile soil, longer droughts, thinner harvests. Archaeologists studying tree rings in the region have found evidence of severe droughts during this period, years when rain all but vanished. The canyons that had once sheltered them grew too dry, the crops too weak. Some villages show signs of hastily abandoned rooms, of pottery left half-finished, of fires that went out and never rekindled. Others bear evidence of conflict, perhaps tension over resources, or migration routes as neighboring groups searched for more fertile ground. Whatever the reason, by the year 1300 the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde were empty. The people had gone, leaving behind only their stonework and silence. But they did not vanish entirely. Their descendants, the modern Pueblo tribes of the southwest, including the Hopi, Zuni, and Acoma, still carry their traditions and stories. To them, Mesa Verde is not a mystery, but a sacred memory. They speak of migration, of moving with the breath of the earth, of listening when the spirits of the land called them onward. The abandonment was not an end, but a continuation of a deeper cycle. Over time, the canyon reclaimed what was left. Winds carried dust into the rooms, rains washed away the plaster, and plants crept back through cracks in the walls. Yet the dwellings endured, their form protected by the same cliffs that once sheltered their builders. Centuries later, in the late 19th century, cowboys riding across the plateau stumbled upon them again, massive stone structures hidden in the shadows, seemingly untouched since the day they were left. When word spread, the world was astonished. Archaeologists descended upon Mesa Verde, uncovering pottery, tools, and ceremonial artifacts that spoke of a civilization as sophisticated as any of its time. They found rooms stacked with grain, ladders leading into kivas, and murals that still glowed faintly with color after 7 centuries. Every discovery deepened the wonder and the questions. How did they build so high, with no metal, no wheels, no beasts of burden? How did they manage to survive for generations in a land so dry, so unpredictable? And what exactly caused them to leave? The answers remain layered in mystery, half in science, half in silence. What we do know is that the ancestral Puebloans were not a lost people, but a living culture that evolved, adapted, and moved with time's current. Their legacy is not just in stone, but in the wisdom of balance between human and land, between progress and reverence. Standing at the edge of the canyon today, the view seems endless. The air is still, save for the wind threading through the pines. Below, the dwellings glow softly in the golden light, each shadow a memory, each wall a whisper. You can almost hear the echo of footsteps on the ladders, the murmur of voices from long ago, the faint thrum of life that once pulsed through these hidden villages. The Mesa Verde cliff dwellings are more than ruins. They are a conversation between past and present, between the endurance of humanity and the patience of the earth. In their quiet symmetry and their seamless bond with the cliffs, they teach us something rare, that survival is not about conquering nature, but listening to it. And though centuries have passed, and the canyons have grown silent, the spirit of those who once lived here has never truly faded. It lingers in the stone, in the wind, in the rhythm of sunlight crossing the walls, a timeless harmony between people and place, still alive beneath the Colorado sky. The Great Mosque of Djenné. The Great Mosque of Djenné stands at the edge of a river that has watched kingdoms rise and vanish, its mud brick towers glowing softly in the Malian sun. From a distance, the mosque looks like a structure born out of the earth itself, as if the Sahel had reached up and molded its spirit into clay. Each curve, each spire, each wooden beam known as a toron, tells a story of time, faith, and the unyielding rhythm of community. To understand Djenné is to step into a living conversation between people and their land, between human hands and the silent patience of mud. Before the first brick was shaped, before the first prayer echoed beneath its earthen vaults, Djenné was already a place of promise. Long before Islam reached these lands, there had been a settlement here, a city of traders and farmers, known as Djenné Djano. It flourished as one of Africa's oldest urban centers, a hub of commerce and craft, nestled by the Banaue River, centuries before the world beyond the desert even knew its name. The river was both lifeline and messenger, bringing goods from across the Sahara, gold from the south, salt from the north, cloth and glass and beads from faraway lands. By the 8th century, Arab merchants had begun to arrive, their caravans shimmering on the horizon like moving mirages, bringing not only trade but ideas, stories, and the faith of Islam. As centuries passed, Djenné grew into a vital link in the trans-Saharan trade routes, a place where gold and books were of equal value, where scholars debated theology under the same sun that baked the clay of new homes and mosques. The original Great Mosque of Djenné, they say, was built around the 13th century, during the reign of King Khoi Khanbaro, who converted to Islam and decided to raise a place of worship worthy of both his faith and his city. It was unlike anything seen before in the region, not a copy of distant architecture from Cairo or Timbuktu, but a reflection of Djenné's own soul, molded from the very earth upon which its people walked. The structure that stands today, however, is not the same one built by Khoi Khanbaro. Time, rebellion, and the heavy hand of history took their toll. The mosque was abandoned, then rebuilt, then restored, most notably in 1907, under French colonial rule, guided by the hands of local masons whose ancestors had built the original. These craftsmen, called baris, carried forward ancient methods, their knowledge passed through generations not by blueprints but by memory, rhythm, and the feeling of clay under the skin. They mixed earth with rice husks, sand and water from the river, forming bonko, the life-giving mud that binds the architecture of the Sahel. When dried beneath the sun, it hardened into walls as strong as stone, yet still alive, breathing with the climate, able to expand and contract as the seasons changed. Each spring, as rains threatened the integrity of the mosque, the entire town of Djenné came together for a festival unlike any other in the world, the crépissage de la Grande Mosquée, the plastering of the Great Mosque. It was not merely maintenance, it was renewal, rebirth, and celebration. Men climbed the toron beams like scaffolding, slapping fresh mud onto cracks and crevices, while women carried water, sang, and prepared meals for the workers. Children laughed, slipping in the mud. The sound of drums echoed through the streets. It was as if the mosque itself was being reborn through the joy of its people. In that moment, Djenné was not just a city, it was a heartbeat, ancient and enduring. The architecture of the mosque reflects this living harmony. Its 3 grand towers, each topped with an ostrich egg symbolizing fertility and purity, reach into the sky like prayers solidified into form. The wooden toron beams that jut from the walls are both practical and poetic, serving as footholds during repairs but also creating the mosque's unmistakable rhythm of shadow and texture. The courtyard spreads wide, open to the air, while the prayer hall, supported by 90 massive pillars, breathes with the scent of earth and cool silence. Light filters through small openings, casting patterns that shift with the sun. The entire structure feels less built than grown, a natural extension of the soil and soul of Djenné. And yet, for all its quiet dignity, the mosque is not a monument to the past alone. It remains a living house of worship, a place where hundreds still gather for Friday prayers, where the imam's voice still rises and falls beneath the same domes that have stood for centuries. Inside, you can feel the weight of history in the air, not as burden, but as blessing. Each whisper, each footstep on the packed earth floor, carries the echo of generations who came before. The Great Mosque is also a symbol of identity. For the people of Djenné, it represents resilience, the ability to rebuild, to endure through droughts, floods, colonization, and change. The French colonizers once admired the mosque as an exotic relic, but to the people of Djenné, it was never a relic at all. It was a living member of their community, one that needed care, attention, and love. When UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1988, the recognition was global, but the pride was deeply local. For the Masons of Djenné, that mud is sacred, a connection between human and divine, past and present. Its simplicity hides its genius. Thick walls insulate against heat. Niches provide storage and airflow. The entire structure adapts to the harsh climate without the need for foreign materials. In a modern world obsessed with glass and steel, Djenné's mosque stands as a quiet argument for sustainability, community, and the art of living with the land instead of against it. Even as climate change and modern pressures threaten the region, the traditions surrounding the mosque continue. The annual replastering still takes place, though fewer young people remain in the city to participate. Some have gone to Bamako or abroad, chasing different futures. Yet when they return, they say, the first sight of those mud spires fills them with a peace that no modern skyline can offer. The Great Mosque of Djenné speaks in silence. It does not need marble or gold to be magnificent. Its grandeur lies in its humility, in the rhythm of hands shaping mud, in the faith that architecture can hold memory as surely as it holds form. When the sun sets and the walls glow orange, it seems to dissolve into the desert light, neither ancient nor modern, simply eternal. For travelers who come upon it for the first time, the sight feels otherworldly. The city's labyrinth of streets opens into a wide market square, and suddenly, there it stands, vast yet delicate, geometric yet soft, symmetrical yet organic. The smell of dust, spices and smoke fills the air. Donkeys pass by. Traders shout in Bambara and Arabic. And above it all, the mosque rises, calm and immovable, as if watching centuries turn like pages. To walk around it is to circle a living relic, one that does not belong to a museum, but to time itself. The Great Mosque of Djenné tells the story of a civilization that never forgot how to listen to the land. Every layer of mud applied over generations carries fingerprints, literal impressions of the people who built, repaired, and prayed within it. Their touch remains there, fossilized in the surface of the walls. No marble cathedral or steel skyscraper can claim the same intimacy. Here architecture is memory, not of conquest, but of coexistence. And when the rains come, and the mosque must once again be repaired, the people of Djenné gather, and the story continues. The young watch the old, learning how to mix the clay, how to listen for its readiness, how to smooth it with palm and patience. The rhythm of their labor mirrors the rhythm of prayer. Every handful of mud is an act of devotion, every Toron beam, a reminder that human faith is strongest when grounded in earth. The Great Mosque of Djenné is more than the sum of its walls. It is the spirit of a people who found eternity in the simplest material. It stands, even now, as the world's largest mud brick building, but also as something more profound, a promise that beauty need not be fragile, that faith can be built by hand, and that the earth itself remembers those who honor it. In the silence of the Sahel, when the evening call to prayer drifts across the square, the mosque seems to breathe, its walls cool, its shadows deepen, and the stars above, the same stars that watched over Djenné, over the caravans, over the kings and masons, begin to shimmer once more. And you realize, standing there beneath them, that time, like mud, can be shaped. The Great Mosque of Djenné is proof of that, a monument not of empire, but of endurance, a reminder that even in dust, humanity can build forever. The Great Mosque of Djenné does not stand alone. Around it, the city breathes in slow, rhythmic time, its streets winding like veins from the market square that stretches before the mosque's earthen facade. As dawn rises, you can hear the faint hum of life awakening, the rustle of woven baskets, the bleating of goats, the quiet voices of traders setting up their stalls beneath canopies of reed and cloth. This city has been a heart of commerce and spirit for nearly 1,000 years, its pulse synchronized with the mosque's shadow. To walk through Djenné is to feel the layers of history beneath your feet, each alleyway holding the memory of caravans that once crossed the Sahara, each courtyard echoing with stories told in the flicker of lantern light. The mosque's walls have seen kings, scholars, soldiers, merchants, and pilgrims pass through, each adding their trace to its soul. In its golden age, during the 15th and 16th centuries, Djenné was not just a trading center, it was a beacon of knowledge and faith. Alongside Timbuktu, it formed part of a great network of learning that stretched across the Mali Empire. Scholars from as far as North Africa and the Middle East came here to study theology, astronomy, mathematics, and law. They arrived with books carried on the backs of camels, wrapped carefully in leather and cloth to protect them from the desert sand. Within the clay houses of the city, hundreds of manuscripts were written by candlelight, delicate Arabic calligraphy inked on parchment made from goatskin, filled with verses, formulas, and dreams of the cosmos. These texts, though now faded, spoke of an Africa that was deeply literate, intellectual, and spiritually sophisticated, long before European explorers mapped its lands. The mosque itself, though quiet, became the symbol of that intellectual life. Its imams taught not only prayer, but philosophy and language. They spoke of how every brick, every grain of sand, was part of a divine order, that the mosque's mud walls were not primitive, but sacred, reflecting humanity's humility before creation. They reminded their students that the Prophet himself had lived simply, that faith was not measured in gold or marble, but in sincerity and community. Within those walls, surrounded by columns of sun-baked earth, young minds grew, carrying forth ideas that would ripple across generations. But Djenné's glory was also tied to its position, to the river that fed its fields, and to the deserts that connected it to the wider world. Caravans of Tuareg traders, their faces veiled in indigo, once arrived with salt from the mines of Taouduni, that precious mineral worth its weight in gold. In return, the markets of Djenné offered textiles, ivory, and above all, the metal of power, gold from the forests beyond the Niger. That gold would travel north to North Africa, then to the Mediterranean, and from there to Europe, shaping economies and empires far beyond the reach of the Sahel. It is said that some of the gold that adorned the crowns of European kings once passed through these very streets. Yet, for all its riches, Djenné's greatest wealth was not material. It was the resilience of its people. When droughts came, they built canals. When floods came, they rebuilt. When colonizers arrived with their strange language and foreign designs, the masons of Djenné continued to build their homes from earth, not because they could not build otherwise, but because they chose not to forget who they were. The French engineers who documented the mosque in the early 20th century often misunderstood it. They saw only the surface, the exotic beauty of its facade, without realizing that beneath that beauty lay an entire philosophy. To the people of Djenné, architecture was not about domination of nature, but harmony with it. The earth was not something to conquer. It was a companion, a collaborator. The mud that built the mosque was gathered with care, mixed with rice husks and water from the river, and shaped by hand in the same way their ancestors had done for over 1,000 years. The annual replastering of the mosque, the crépissage, remained the most powerful expression of that harmony. Every year, usually after the rains, the entire town would gather for this sacred renewal. Boys and men clambered up the wooden beams, women mixed the mud, and the air filled with the laughter and music of labor turned into joy. This ritual was more than maintenance, it was identity. Even children understood that they were not just fixing walls, they were preserving history, protecting a story larger than themselves. In a world where so much is replaced when it ages, Djenné's people choose to repair. At night, when the work is done and the moon rises over the river, the mosque glows softly, its surface still damp with fresh clay. The smell of earth lingers, warm and familiar. Across the square, the sounds of life fade into silence. And there, in that quiet, you can almost feel the past breathing, the pulse of a civilization that refused to vanish. Beyond Djenné, the legacy of its mosque ripples across West Africa. Its architectural language, those tapering towers, those wooden torons, that rhythm of geometry and curve, can be seen in towns scattered across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. It influenced generations of builders, each adapting the style to their landscape. This is why Sahelian architecture feels alive. It is not frozen in one form but evolves, like a tree growing from deep roots. Even in the modern age, architects look to Djenné for inspiration. In its simplicity, they see sophistication. In its fragility, they find strength. The mosque challenges the very definition of permanence. It stands not because it cannot fall, but because its people never stop rebuilding it. That idea that endurance is not about resisting change but embracing it, lies at the heart of Djenné's philosophy. In this way, the mosque is a living metaphor for humanity itself. There is also something mystical about its proportions. Scholars have studied its design, noting how it aligns subtly with the sun and wind. The central minaret catches the morning light first, while the outer towers mark the rhythm of the day. The thick walls, up to half a meter wide, maintain a cool interior, even when the outside temperature soars. Its architecture is both scientific and spiritual, an early form of environmental design born from necessity and genius. No written manual existed for its creation. Everything was taught by experience, passed from master mason to apprentice in words and gestures. To this day, the secrets of mixing the perfect banco mud are guarded by the city's families of builders, their knowledge whispered rather than written. Inside the mosque, the air feels still and heavy with memory. Pillars rise like tree trunks, and the soft glow of light filtering through small holes gives the space an almost underwater calm. It is easy to imagine centuries of worshippers bowing in unison, their voices rising like waves. The mosque has survived colonial neglect, natural disasters, and even the slow erosion of time. Yet despite all that, it endures, not as a monument frozen in history, but as a living soul of its people. However, the modern world has begun to press harder on Djenné's quiet rhythm. The river that once guaranteed the city's life now floods unpredictably. Climate change has made the Sahel's seasons harsher, its rains more erratic. The younger generation, drawn to opportunities elsewhere, sometimes see the old traditions as burdens rather than blessings. The ancient craft of mud construction faces competition from cement and brick, materials that promise durability but erase the intimacy between builder and land. Yet, there are still those who return, those who cannot forget the feeling of wet clay between their fingers, who see in the mosque not just religion or architecture, but identity. In recent years, efforts have been made to preserve both the structure and the traditions around it. UNESCO, working with local masons and communities, has helped document the techniques that built Djenné's mosque, ensuring that even if modernity changes the city, the knowledge will not be lost. But the true preservation does not come from outside, it lives in the people who still climb the mosque's walls each year, their laughter echoing as they spread mud like a benediction. The Great Mosque of Djenné also represents a quiet defiance. In a world that often equates progress with glass and steel, it stands as a reminder that true progress may lie in remembering how to live with the earth. Its mud is humble, but it endures storms that shatter concrete. Its design is ancient, but its sustainability outpaces modern invention. It does not pollute, it does not consume, it only returns what it takes. For centuries, it has been the spiritual center of Djenné, but also its social core. The market square before it has witnessed everything: marriages, debates, festivals, and farewells. Travelers resting after long journeys once sat there at dusk, watching the sunset turn the mosque to gold. Merchants haggled beneath its shadow, children played among the stalls, and storytellers recited epics of kings and spirits to crowds that gathered under the stars. Even today, when motorbikes hum where donkeys once trod, the rhythm feels timeless. In the golden light of evening, the great mosque seems less like a building and more like a mirage of memory, something suspended between past and present. The ostrich eggs atop its towers glint faintly in the dying sun, symbols of life and rebirth, reminders that even the most fragile of materials can carry deep meaning. For the people of Djenné, those eggs are promises that the world will renew itself, that the rains will come, that the community will endure. And yet, perhaps the most haunting beauty of Djenné is this: everything about it is impermanent, and that impermanence is sacred. Each crack that forms on the wall is not a flaw but a reminder that life moves, that the passage of time is natural. In repairing those cracks, the people reaffirm their connection to each other and to their ancestors. In that sense, the mosque is not just an architectural masterpiece, it is a spiritual act repeated endlessly. Visitors who come to Djenné often speak of an overwhelming calm. The silence inside the mosque, the vastness of the market square, the softness of the air, all seem to slow the heart. It is as if time itself moves differently here. Some say they can hear whispers in the walls, the murmurs of those who prayed here centuries ago. Others describe feeling humbled, realizing that a structure made of simple earth can outlast entire empires. As the sun sets and the muezzin's call echoes once again, the city seems to bow with him. The sound travels across rooftops, over the river, into the desert beyond. In that moment, the great mosque of Djenné feels infinite, a link between humanity and creation, a rhythm between earth and sky. It asks for nothing, yet gives everything: shelter, faith, memory, and belonging. And so, as night falls over the Sahel, the story continues. The story of a city that rose from clay, of hands that built harmony from dust, of a faith that found eternity not in marble but in mud. The Great Mosque of Djenné remains, not as a relic of the past, but as a living testament to the timeless art of endurance, to the quiet truth that sometimes the most fragile things are the ones that last forever. The Banaue rice terraces. High in the mountains of northern Luzon, in the heart of the Philippines, lies a landscape that seems sculpted not by human hands, but by the patient rhythm of the earth itself. Layer upon layer of green stretches up the slopes, like the steps of some ancient giant staircase. These are the Banaue rice terraces, carved into the Cordillera Mountains over 2,000 years ago by the Ifugao people. Even today they seem to hum with quiet life, as though the mountains themselves remember every hand that shaped them. In the early morning, before the sun crests the peaks, a soft mist settles into the terraces, drifting lazily between the ridges. From afar, the land looks like a painting come alive, endless ripples of green and gold reflecting a pale blue sky. Water trickles down from mountain springs, moving through ancient canals built with stone and clay. The sound is constant, a steady, whispering music of the fields that has never truly stopped since the day they were first carved. The terraces rise in layers, sometimes taller than a man, each one bordered by walls carefully packed by hand. The stones hold firm even against the monsoon rains, a testament to both skill and patience. Farmers walk the narrow ridges barefoot, balancing with quiet ease as they check the seedlings, or scoop a handful of mud to test its moisture. Generations have done this, tracing the same paths, repeating the same careful movements, each season a memory etched into the mountain. These terraces are more than farmland. They are the lifeblood of a people who learned to live not by conquering their land, but by working in harmony with it. The Ifugao built an irrigation system so precise and sustainable that it still functions today, channeling water from the rainforests above through bamboo pipes and stone channels. It is a living system, adjusted by hand and eye, fed by the pulse of the rain. When you stand at the edge of a terrace, looking down at the layers descending into the valley, it's hard to imagine the time it took to shape them. Centuries of labor, guided by memory rather than maps, by instinct rather than machines. Each terrace was carved with simple tools, wooden spades, stones, and the sheer will of those who believed that the mountain could feed them if treated with care. At planting season, the terraces come alive with motion. Families gather, young and old, to set the seedlings. The mud is soft and cool beneath their feet, the water glinting in the sun. Laughter carries across the slopes, mingling with the distant crow of a rooster. Songs drift on the wind, ancient chants meant to bless the rice and ensure a bountiful harvest. The melody is low and rhythmic, rising and falling with the wind, echoing off the walls of earth and stone. The rice itself, the traditional variety, is red, glistening with oil when cooked, and richer in taste than most modern strains. It takes longer to grow and more care to maintain, but it is part of the Ufugao's identity. To plant it is to connect to ancestors who walked these terraces long before the Spanish first set foot in the islands. Each harvest is both a meal and a ritual, a communion with history. As night falls, the terraces transform once more. The moonlight reflects in the water-filled fields, turning the landscape into a mirror of silver steps cascading down the mountain. The frogs begin their chorus, the wind shifts through the palms, and the stars settle above like scattered grains of rice. In this silence, you can almost sense the breath of the ancestors, their presence woven into the sound of the flowing water. Archaeologists and historians have long studied the terraces, trying to trace their origins, but there is no single moment that marks their beginning. They were not built in a single generation, but rather through time itself, a continuous process of shaping, repairing, planting, and passing on. The Ifugao have a saying, "The land is alive because we listen." To them, the terraces are not ruins or relics. They are part of a cycle of rain and sun, birth and death, seed and harvest. Every crack repaired, every channel cleaned, is an act of care, of renewal. What makes the Banaue rice terraces even more remarkable is their endurance. Despite centuries of storms, earthquakes, and changing times, they remain. Even now, when modern roads wind into the valleys and concrete towns grow nearby, many families still tend the terraces as their ancestors did, with hand and heart. They understand that the terraces are not just land, but legacy. They hold stories within their curves, of rituals performed at dawn, of festivals where drums echoed through the night, of prayers whispered to the spirits of the mountains. And those stories continue to live, not in books or museums, but in the daily rhythm of farming itself. The fields are like pages, written in mud and water, erased and rewritten each year with the coming of the rains. The terraces also mirror the Ifugao's spiritual world. Each layer is connected to the gods who dwell in the mountains and rivers. Rice is seen as sacred, a gift from the deities, to be returned with gratitude. Before planting or harvest, elders offer sacrifices of wine, betel nut, or the blood of a chicken, calling upon the spirits to bless the crops. These rituals are not superstition, but balance, a way of acknowledging the unseen forces that govern the living world. The terraces, seen from the valley floor, rise like a cathedral of earth, each wall and curve a pillar of devotion. And in their quiet symmetry, one can read a truth that modern life often forgets, that beauty and survival can grow from the same soil when one works with the land, not against it. As the sun climbs, casting golden light across the slopes, the mist lifts, and the green turns vivid. It's then you see how the terraces catch the sky, each pool of water reflecting clouds, making the mountains appear endless. It is said that the terraces, when seen from above, resemble the profile of an ancient face gazing toward the heavens, perhaps that of the mountain god himself. Whether that's true or not, standing among them feels like standing in a place where time folds in on itself. The Ifugao often say their ancestors are still here, watching from the ridges. Their spirits linger in the bamboo groves, in the rustle of the rice stalks, in the cool trickle of water moving through the channels. And when the wind blows across the terraces, it carries their whispers, soft reminders of endurance, of patience, and of the delicate bond between humanity and the earth. The Banaue rice terraces are not merely ancient engineering, they are living art, an ongoing conversation between mountain and man, between the past and the present. And as long as someone tends the rice, the mountains will remember. The Tenochtitlan causeways. In the heart of the Valley of Mexico, long before the Spanish arrived, before the echo of cannons and the fall of empires, there was water, shimmering, endless water. It covered the land like a living mirror, broken only by small green islands that seemed to float between the clouds. And rising from that vast lake was a city so astonishing that even those who conquered it could scarcely believe what they saw. That city was Tenochtitlan, the jewel of the Aztec world, a metropolis built on water, connected to the land by its lifelines, the great causeways. These causeways, 3 immense raised roads stretching across Lake Texcoco, were the veins of the city, broad, solid, and alive with movement. They linked Tenochtitlan to the mainland towns of Tacuba, Tepeyac, and Iztapalapa, carrying traders, priests, farmers, and warriors across the glimmering expanse. Each was wide enough for 10 men to walk abreast, and long enough that a traveler could lose sight of land, surrounded only by the lake and the slow rhythm of paddles from passing canoes. To walk those causeways was to move between worlds, the watery realm of the gods below and the living world of men above. The air smelled of salt and lilies, of wet reeds and burning copal. The stone beneath your feet was cool and rough, built from layers of volcanic rock carried by hand from distant quarries. Along the edges, canals ran parallel, filled with traders' canoes laden with maize, obsidian, cacao, and tropical birds whose feathers shimmered like flame. Every dawn, as the first light spilled over the mountains, the causeways came alive. Thousands of footsteps echoed across the stones, market women carrying baskets, priests in white robes, soldiers in jaguar pelts, and children running to fetch water. The rhythm of the city pulsed through these roads, the lifeblood of an empire that fed on trade, ritual, and precision. The engineering behind the causeways was as remarkable as the city they served. Each road was built from layers of volcanic stone, sand, and lime, anchored deep into the lakebed. Wooden stakes were driven into the mud to keep the structure from shifting, while sluice gates allowed the Aztecs to control the water level during floods or droughts. At intervals, bridges of wood and reeds were laid, movable sections that could be pulled away to isolate the city in times of war. It was through these same causeways that Cortés and his men would later march, awed, then bewildered, and finally horrified by the splendor they would destroy. But long before conquest, before ruin, these roads were arteries of life, threading the floating gardens and shimmering canals of the Aztec capital. Imagine approaching Tenochtitlan at dusk along the western causeway from Tacuba. The sky is deep gold, the lake glassy and still. The air hums with distant drums, the heartbeat of the city. Ahead, the temples rise in silhouette, stone pyramids catching the last rays of the sun, smoke curling from their altars. The city seems to float, its buildings mirrored perfectly in the lake below, as though it were built twice, once for men and once for the gods. As you walk, torches flicker to life along the edges, casting wavering light over the water. Canoes glide silently beneath, their paddlers guiding them through the narrow channels that crisscross the wetlands. You hear the faint rustle of reeds, the call of birds settling for the night, and the soft splash of oars. By the time you reach the gates of Tenochtitlan, the stars are out, and the whole city glows, thousands of lights reflected in the lake, as if the heavens themselves have descended to rest upon the water. To the Aztecs, these causeways were more than infrastructure, they were sacred pathways built with both practicality and reverence. They symbolized the connection between earth and the divine, between the land of the living and the watery underworld of the gods. Every stone was placed with intention, every bridge aligned with the logic of both engineering and belief. The city's design was not random but cosmic, a mirror of the heavens laid upon the earth. Along the causeways, travelers would sometimes stop to make offerings at small shrines built into the roadside. They left flowers, maize, or drops of pulque, praying for safe passage across the water. For though the lake appeared calm, it was full of unseen dangers, shifting mud, sudden storms, and the spirits of those who had drowned. The Aztecs believed that each crossing required both strength and respect. At the edges of the causeways, great chinampas, floating gardens, spread out in geometric patterns. Farmers worked knee-deep in water, tending rows of maize, beans, and squash. The scent of wet earth mixed with the sweet smell of blooming flowers. These gardens, built on rafts of reeds and mud, were tethered to the lake bed and irrigated through the canals. They fed the entire city, transforming the lake itself into farmland. From above, it must have looked like a quilt of green laid over shimmering blue. In festivals, the causeways became ceremonial routes. Priests and nobles in feathered cloaks would process along them, carrying banners embroidered with turquoise and gold. Musicians played conch shells and drums, their sound echoing across the water. At the great temple in the city's heart, offerings of jade and blood would be made to the gods of rain and sun, Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli, whose favor ensured that both city and crops would thrive. But the causeways were not only roads of celebration, they were also defenses. The Aztecs designed them with strategic precision. When invaders approached, the wooden bridges could be removed, cutting off access. The city could then be reached only by boat, forcing enemies into narrow channels where Aztec warriors could strike from canoes. For nearly a century, this design kept Tenochtitlan safe and unconquered, a fortress on water, guarded by engineering and faith. Even now, buried beneath the sprawl of modern Mexico City, traces of the ancient causeways remain. Archaeologists have uncovered sections of their stone foundations, black volcanic rocks still sharp after 5 centuries. In some places, the outlines of the old canals can still be seen, now swallowed by streets and buildings. Yet the memory endures, woven into the very layout of the city. The causeways of Tenochtitlan were not built for eternity, yet they achieved it in a different way. Though the water has been drained, the islands filled, and the temples toppled, their spirit survives in the memory of the landscape. Where once canoes glided and torches burned, cars now move, and lights flicker, but beneath it all lies the same ancient rhythm, the same pulse of a city that refused to stand still. If you stand today at the Plaza de la Constitucion, the Zocalo, you stand where the center of Tenochtitlan once was. Beneath your feet lie the ghosts of roads that once cut across the lake like threads of stone, and if you close your eyes, you might still hear it, the whisper of water against the stones, the echo of footsteps along the causeway, and the far-off chant of a priest calling out to the gods of the lake. Because in truth, Tenochtitlan has never really vanished. It lingers, hidden but alive, beneath the skin of modern Mexico City. Its causeways, though buried, still trace the paths that once bound water to earth and men to the heavens. The city was born of the lake, rose from it, and in some quiet way still sleeps within it, its memory rippling beneath the surface like light caught in water. The Persepolis Terrace. Beneath the burning sun of southern Iran, where the mountains of Fars stretch like a patient stone serpent across the horizon, there rises a platform carved from the bones of the earth itself. It is not merely a structure, it is an idea made of stone. This is Persepolis, the heart of an empire that once stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, a city meant not just to rule, but to impress eternity. When the winds sweep across the terraces, they carry whispers of kings who dreamed in gold and stone, of stonemasons whose hands shaped myths, and of envoys who once climbed these very stairs, trembling beneath the gaze of Persia's great kings. The Persepolis Terrace was no simple foundation, it was a declaration, a massive stone platform carved into the hillside, raised with an ambition so grand it seemed to challenge nature itself. Each block was cut and fitted without mortar, weighing tons, yet resting together with impossible precision. From the plain below, the platform glowed in the desert light, a vision of power suspended between heaven and earth. And on top of it, Darius the Great would build his city of wonders, his testament to order, empire, and divine right. The story begins around 518 BCE, when Darius I ordered construction to begin on this site near the old city of Pasargadae, the resting place of Cyrus the Great. Darius wanted not just a capital, but a statement, a ceremonial center that embodied the unity of the many nations under Persian rule. Unlike other capitals, Persepolis was not built for defense or daily life. It was built for spectacle, for ceremony, for the gathering of the world beneath one roof. The terraces were laid out to elevate this vision, both physically and symbolically. Imagine the arrival of envoys during the festival of Nowruz, the Persian New Year. From across the empire they came, Lydians from Anatolia carrying woven robes and polished silver bowls, Indians bearing gold dust and ivory, Medes and Elamites with their fine horses and crafted blades. The processional staircases, carved with scenes of tribute bearers, were designed so that each visitor climbed slowly, step by step, into the realm of the king. The height of each stair was carefully measured so that guests could ascend gracefully, without haste, allowing the full vision of the terrace to unfold before them. As they reached the top, the gate of all nations awaited, a monumental gateway flanked by colossal bulls with human heads and feathered crowns. They were not mere decorations, they were symbols, guardians that watched over the empire's spiritual order. Each stone was polished until it caught the sunlight like bronze, and the air was thick with incense and expectation. The terrace floor beneath them was smooth, echoing the footsteps of the world. To the west stood the Apadana, the great audience hall. Its roof, supported by 72 columns, soared higher than any building in Persia. Each column was topped with double-headed bulls, lions, or griffins, their carved faces gazing outward, eternal in their vigilance. When the king held court, the hall was filled with color and sound, embroidered garments, the scent of myrrh, the murmur of translators carrying the words of tribute and submission from a dozen tongues. In this hall, Darius and his successors performed not only the rituals of power, but the theater of empire. Every carved relief along the terrace told the same story, not conquest, but harmony. Nations united under the protection of the king. Each figure, Greek, Babylonian, Egyptian, Median, was depicted with dignity, their gestures formal, their offerings precise. In this way, Persepolis told the story the empire wanted the world to believe, that order had triumphed over chaos, and all peoples could find peace under the Persian crown. But beneath the marble serenity, another story lingered. The workers who built this place came from every corner of the empire. Archaeological evidence reveals the marks of different languages inscribed behind the stones, records of wages, measurements, and materials. These laborers were not slaves, they were paid workers, craftsmen of astonishing skill. Their marks remain hidden, preserved like whispers in the seams of history. The terrace itself was a living map of Persian cosmology. The arrangement of halls and gates followed the principles of a Achaemenid order, reflecting the harmony between heaven, earth, and the divine. Each direction was chosen deliberately, aligning with the cardinal points, the path of the sun, and the sacred flow of ceremonies. When the king walked the terrace, his every step followed a ritual geometry meant to mirror the journey of divine light through the world. At dusk, the terrace transformed. The shadows of columns stretched like fingers across the marble, and the setting sun painted the reliefs with molten gold. The air cooled, carrying the scent of distant gardens, royal orchards where water flowed through channels carved with mathematical precision. This union of stone, water, and light was the essence of Persian architecture, to create balance between man and the cosmos. But Persepolis was more than architecture. It was ideology turned to stone. Darius's inscriptions carved high on the walls spoke in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. "I am Darius, great king, king of kings," one begins. "By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I built this palace." These words were not meant for mortal ears alone. They were proclamations to eternity, an attempt to fix divine favor in stone. The terrace, however, was not immune to time's slow decay. Even in its glory, it bore the weight of impermanence. Every festival, every procession, every echo of footsteps beneath the sun carried within it the seed of silence. And centuries later, that silence would fall, sudden and cruel. When Alexander the Great marched through Persia in 330 BCE, he stood before Persepolis in awe. The city was immense, shimmering like a mirage. For a time, he spared it, honoring its beauty. But later, in a moment of drunken vengeance or cold strategy, he gave the order, fire. The flames consumed wood, silk, and tapestry. Smoke rose into the night, staining the stars above the terrace. The city of harmony burned, and the empire's proud symbols cracked and blackened in the heat. Yet even as the fire consumed its surface, Persepolis endured. The terrace itself, carved from the mountain, refused to vanish. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, sand buried the ruins, and memory turned to myth. But beneath the desert, the stones waited, patient as time itself. When modern archaeologists uncovered Persepolis in the 20th century, they found fragments of that lost perfection. Broken columns still stood like ribs of a vanished colossus. Reliefs still showed the faces of envoys, long turned to dust. The platform, still solid, still immense, revealed the order and ambition of an age that believed it could speak directly to the gods through geometry and light. The Persepolis terrace remains a paradox, a ruin that still commands reverence, a silence that still speaks. Its stones carry not just the story of kings, but the echo of all who climbed its steps, the artisans, the traders, the nameless hands that shaped its face. Beneath every crack lies a pulse, faint but eternal. As twilight descends upon the ruins today, the terrace glows once more, not with gold or fire, but with memory. The voices of the past linger in the wind, carried across the plain of Marv dashed. The terrace endures, half in shadow, half in dream, a stone heartbeat in the desert, waiting for dawn. The wind that sweeps across the Persepolis terrace today carries whispers, fragments of ceremonies long past, faint echoes of drums, horns, and the rhythmic chants of courtiers in flowing robes. When you walk upon the marble steps, worn smooth by centuries of feet that once climbed them in reverence and duty, it feels as though time itself holds its breath. The air, still and warm, is filled with the ghosts of precision and grandeur. A silent performance still unfolding, even after 2,500 years. The story of Persepolis does not end with its construction. The terrace was not just a monument to empire, it was a living, breathing theater of administration, diplomacy, and devotion. Every relief, every staircase, every stone platform had a role to play in the imperial ritual of power. When the great kings of Persia held court, the world came to them, and the world was made to feel its smallness in the shadow of these mighty walls. Imagine standing at the gate of all nations, where delegates from dozens of subject lands once gathered, each bearing their tribute. Babylonian emissaries with bolts of linen and carved vessels, Indian traders with ivory and spices, Lydians with finely wrought silver and horses, Egyptians with papyrus and exotic animals. They would ascend the broad staircases slowly, deliberately, as if each step were part of a carefully orchestrated ceremony, an ascent toward awe. The massive bull-headed columns loomed above, their fluted shafts painted in dazzling colors now lost to time. The gate, guarded by colossal lamassu-like figures, seemed to watch over them with both mercy and menace. At the heart of the terrace stood the Apodana, the grand audience hall of Darius the Great. Its vast roof was supported by 72 columns rising 20 meters into the sky, each crowned with the double-headed bulls or lions that symbolized royal authority. The floor beneath shimmered once with polished stone, the walls now bare, were adorned with painted reliefs of noble processions. Here the great king sat upon his throne, slightly elevated, his presence both divine and distant. To be granted an audience was not merely a political act, it was a spiritual moment, a brush with the embodiment of empire itself. The Apodana reliefs remain among the finest examples of Achaemenid artistry. Carved with remarkable delicacy, they depict 23 delegations bringing gifts from across the known world. Each group is distinct, identifiable by clothing, hairstyle, and the nature of their tribute, yet they all share one trait: calm, respectful composure. No scene of conquest or violence mars these walls, instead there is order, a visual declaration that Persia ruled, not through chaos but through harmony. It is propaganda, yes, but propaganda rendered with grace. Behind the grand facades, the terrace hid a complex system of rooms and corridors, each with its own function. The treasury, located to the east, was vast and heavily guarded, housing gold, silver, and treasures gathered from the farthest reaches of the empire. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of clay tablets within it, administrative records written in Elamite cuneiform. They record wages paid to workers, rations distributed to women and children, and inventories of livestock and provisions. These humble details reveal that the grandeur of Persepolis was sustained by a bureaucracy of astonishing sophistication. But beneath the ceremony and structure, there was also fragility. The Persepolis terrace was an emblem of human ambition, and inevitably, of its limits. For decades after Darius's reign, it flourished under Xerxes and Artaxerxes, expanding and evolving. Yet even as its splendor reached its zenith, the seeds of its destruction were already being sown. In 330 BCE, Alexander of Macedon entered Persia. His armies, battle-hardened and relentless, swept through the empire that Darius I had forged. When Alexander reached Persepolis, he was struck by its magnificence. Ancient accounts suggest he lingered there for months, perhaps mesmerized by its wealth, perhaps burdened by its symbolism, the heart of the empire he had just conquered. But then came fire. Whether it was deliberate vengeance for the Persian burning of Athens, or a drunken act of impulse, the result was the same. Flames devoured Persepolis. The cedar beams of the Apodana blazed like torches, sending columns of smoke curling into the night. Gold melted and ran like rivers across the terrace stones. Paintings, textiles, tapestries, all turned to ash. The reliefs blackened, cracked, and broke away from the walls, and in a single night, the ceremonial heart of Persia fell silent. The ruins that remain today are both haunting and defiant. The massive staircases still climb toward the sky, though their once perfect symmetry is marred by time. The columns rise like ribs of a forgotten beast, framing nothing but wind and stars. The carvings, though scarred, still bear the faces of the tribute-bearers, eternally frozen mid-step, forever ascending toward a king who no longer sits upon his throne. And yet, Persepolis endures. The terrace, in its ruined state, has outlasted empires, dynasties, and conquerors. When archaeologists first began to study it in the early 20th century, they were astonished by the precision of its engineering. The drainage systems were designed to handle sudden desert rains. The layout followed geometric patterns of near-perfect symmetry. The stones fit together so precisely that even millennia later, a knife blade can scarcely slip between them. Such craftsmanship reveals not only aesthetic mastery but an understanding of environment and function that modern engineers still admire. Today, as sunlight falls upon the pale stone, it reveals shades of pink, gold, and ochre, the same tones that must have glowed under the torches of imperial banquets. The terrace, stripped of its grandeur, has taken on a new kind of beauty, one born of endurance and silence. Visitors walk among the ruins, tracing the outlines of walls long vanished, feeling the scale of ambition that dared to build such a place. Each column stump, each fragment of relief, speaks of a vision that transcended the immediate, a desire to build not just for power, but for eternity. To the ancient Persians, Persepolis was not simply a capital, it was the world in miniature, a cosmic order rendered in stone. Its terraces symbolized ascent, from the human to the divine, from chaos to order, from the earth to the heavens. And perhaps that is why even now it moves those who stand before it. The silence is not empty, it hums with memory. The wind that drifts across the stones carries the weight of voices once proud, now hushed but not gone. As twilight falls, Persepolis glows with an otherworldly light. The shadows of its columns stretch long across the plateau, like sundials marking the passage of forgotten centuries. Stars emerge above, the same constellations that watched over the kings of old. For a brief moment, it feels as if the world pauses, as if the empire, the ceremonies, the music, and the fire have all collapsed into this single breath of stillness. The Persepolis Terrace stands as both a ruin and a revelation, a testament to human grandeur and to the impermanence that shadows all achievement. Empires rise, stones fall, and yet the stories carved upon them endure, whispering to those who will listen. And if you close your eyes beneath that vast Persian sky, you can almost hear the echo of the procession still ascending, step by step, toward a throne that gleamed once in golden light. As the echoes of ancient footsteps fade, we're reminded that history never truly sleeps, it only waits to be heard again. These places, built by hands long gone, still breathe beneath the dust of time. If you enjoyed this journey through Unearthed Secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Until next time, rest easy, and let the whispers of the past guide your dreams.